Thanks, everybody. I have to say that there are a few people in the industry that bring tears to my eyes, and Frank Romano happens to be one of them. And I'm going to try not to cry now, but when I first started in advertising, I had no idea what was going on, and my cousin was a copywriter, and she handed me this book called The Pocket Pal. And she said, everything you need to survive in advertising and understand what everybody's talking about is in this book. And years later, and it was true. It helped me. I didn't have to ask stupid questions to people. I was able to look in my Pocket Pal and get a basic understanding of how the printing happened and what file creation and all the terms that everybody around me were using that I had no idea what they were talking about. So when I met Frank and I told him that story, it's true. I never would have survived 25 years plus in advertising if I didn't get that book my first week working at FCB. So that was one of the monumental moments. And the second I have to say is actually this. Frank created an amazing personalized tour of the Museum of Printing, where he is currently the curator, as well as being an industry icon for all of us today. And let's go right to the video. And when it's done, we have Jim Hamilton here, who's the vice president of the Museum of Printing Board of Directors, who's going to share a little more information about how we can all get involved in supporting the museum. So as they say, roll the tape.
Happy International Print Day, a great day to celebrate print in all its forms. And what better day than to visit the Museum of Printing in Haverhill, Massachusetts. It's spelled Haverhill, but pronounced Haverhill. Everybody say Haverhill. You're now official Haverhillites. Handset type was contained in two cases. The upper case for your big letters, the lower case for your small letters. That's where the terminology comes from. You picked out the letters one at a time and assembled them in a composing stick, which you held in your hand. You were working upside down and backwards, so you had to watch your P's and Q's. The first thing you see when you enter the museum is the second prototype of the linotype machine. This is a device invented by Ottmar Mergenthaler, and it's one of the devices that changed the printing industry forever. This is a Colombian press from 1813. It's been restored, but we use it every day to print on. It's an amazing device and typical of how they decorated them in the 1800s. These are called platen presses. They have foot pedals, and as a result, you only needed one operator. However, the image area that you were printing was much smaller than a hand press. These are called hand presses. Gutenberg's press was all wood. Ben Franklin's press was wood with some metal parts. And after 1820, most presses are all metal. These presses required two operators. This is the version of the linotype that most people would recognize. This particular version was built in 1950. Newspapers like the New York Times would have 100 of these. In the magazine above are little brass matrices, and as they were keyboarded on a keyboard, they would fall down and assemble into a line. That line of type then would be sent to a casting mechanism where there is molten metal at 550 degrees. And out would come a slug. The slugs would be assembled into columns. The columns would be assembled into pages. And that's how newspapers set their type. The matrices would then be returned to the magazine, and you would start for the next line, etc. An amazing device invented by Ottmar Mergenthaler. This is a lockup. As you can see, all of the type that was set with the linotype, columns, wide areas for advertising, all of that was set on the linotype, whereas ads were done separately. If there's big type, it was probably done on a different machine called the Ludlow. Everything was locked up in this frame called a chase. And in this particular case, on this press, which is a early 1880s rotary press, they would have had two of these on the bed of the press, and it would have printed 2 pages on one side. Then they would let the ink dry, and then they would print the second side, so you'd have a 4-page broadsheet newspaper. The type would be locked up in this frame called a chase, and all of the columns of type, photo engravings, would be locked up in page form. From this, they would make a mold called a flang. You can just see the texture of it here. They would pour molten metal into it and create a cylinder. The cylinder is what would go on the press, because you needed the plates to be round so they could handle rolls of paper going through. This particular plate is unique because it says "Men walk on moon." As offset lithography began to dominate in the industry, using hot metal made no sense because you had to then pull a proof and then photograph it to film. The objective of photo typesetting was to set type directly on film. These machines are film setters. It's the only collection of these machines in the world because no one saved them because you can't do anything with them. This machine here was the first photographic typesetter. The Intertype photo setter was more or less based on a linotype, except that each matrix had a little piece of film in its belly. It was a really dumb idea. Then there was the Monophoto, the ATF-B8, CompuGraphic comes along, Mergenthaler enters the market, and as a result, we now have about 20 suppliers of photo typesetting machines. This is a color scanner from 1960. It's a Hell scanner. You put your original on the drum, it scanned it, and then on the other side, it exposed 4 negatives, yellow, magenta, cyan, and black. With all of its accoutrements, it was about $1 million. As time went on, scanners got smaller and smaller and smaller. Today, in most cases, they're part of your printer, and you get them for nothing. In this large area, a number of things are going on. This is an exhibit on the history of the English dictionary. The back wall shows the wood engraving of Anna Hogan. This table shows the evolution of illustration in print. We have over 1,300 leaves from publications from the 15th and 16th century. We have an entire wall dedicated to chromolithography, using lithostones to reproduce color. There's a wall here on wooden type, which we'll cover in a minute. As we move toward the back here, there's another wall of wood engraving. There's a wall of Lance Heide's work. He was the first graphic designer to use Photoshop. There's a small display of the earliest books of punctuation. Here in the center is a copy of the Nuremberg Chronicle. Well, not the complete copy, the rest of it's in a safe, but this was a history of the world published in 1493. It was the first book to mention Gutenberg as the inventor of printing. And then these cabinets here are samples of wood type fonts. We have the largest collection of wood and metal decorative type in the world. Welcome to the Bible Room, where we have put together a history of the printed Bible, the most printed publication on earth. There are many rare Bibles here, printed in different cities at different times. There's a replica of a Gutenberg Bible. We have one leaf from every Bible printed in colonial America, including the first Bible, which was done on the first printing press that came to America, went to Harvard, and printed the Eliot Bible, which was in Algonquin. Then we have an entire wall dedicated to the evolution of the English Bible. We have an original copy of the Geneva Bible. We have a replica of the original King James Bible that you can leaf through. And we have an original Baskerville Bible. This is where he designed a typeface that we still use to this day. Beautiful typeface and a beautiful Bible. Typewriters are also part of the graphic arts when you get right down to it. Many typewriters were adapted to print out proportional type, so they could be used as quasi-typesetting machines. We have about 40 rare typewriters here. There are also other office machines, the mimeograph being the most common, the Gestetner, the Ditto, the addressograph, which was used to address mailers of various kinds. And again, a whole panoply of machines that were used in offices in order to reproduce information. We've tried to keep it all in one area here at the Museum of Printing. We have a typewriter that kids can type on. We even have a Lego typewriter if you wish to give that a shot. Desktop publishing began with this machine, which was the Apple Lisa. It was overpriced and undercapable and really did not succeed. However, it served as the basis for the Macintosh, which became immensely successful. And of course, there were many other computers that evolved over the years, and desktop publishing was really the major change in the printing industry. Even up here, we have a Next machine. That's the company that Steve Jobs created when he left Apple. Later, Apple bought the company in order to get him back. We even have some of the early laser printers, the first printers to use PostScript. This is the Xerox 914, the first plain paper copier. It came with a fire extinguisher because every now and then it would burst into flames. Xerox said that that was a feature. This is lithography using a stone, lithos for stone, graphy for writing. Anything that you could draw on the stone could be reproduced. This is a little area of paste-up. A paste-up was a board where you set your type on photo paper instead of film and then pasted it up on the board. It was called a mechanical, and then you photographed that to film and then stripped up the film in order to produce what you needed to make a plate, and the plate then went on your press and then printed. This is the last linotype that was ever built, 1981. As phototypesetting was replacing hot metal, and especially the linotype machine, the linotype company tried to speed up and modernize the linotype to make it look more modern, if you will. In any case, it was too late. The industry had changed, phototypesetting was coming in strongly, and the linotype was dying quickly. This is the museum studio, where there are a number of different printing presses that members can use to print their projects. And if you come to the Museum of Printing, make sure you visit our great museum shop, where you can buy posters, small presses, typewriters, prints of all kinds, books that relate to the industry, a whole variety of materials tied to the graphic arts and typography. This library contains 11,000 volumes about the printing industry. Books about books, books about book publishers, books about newspaper publishers, an entire cabinet dedicated to them, by the way. Books about calligraphy, books about the alphabet, the evolution of the alphabet, books about printing unions, books about lithography, letterpress, books about wood engraving, books about intaglio, books about desktop publishing, encyclopedias. We have one of every encyclopedia published in the United States, only one volume, the P volume for printing, of course. A lot of rare books in here, books about the history of printing that were done in the very early days in the 1700s and 1800s. Not only is it a library, but there are also displays of various books, plates, and other materials. The library is completely accessible by researchers. Almost all the books are in a database, so we can find them. They're allowed to copy them, scan them. We just don't let them take them away. So everything has to be done here at the Museum of Printing. It is a gigantic room filled with books. This display covers everything about Ottmar Mergenthaler, his autobiography, books about him, samples of type. This is the edition of the New York Tribune, the first edition that actually was set with a linotype machine. These are some of the publications that were done by the linotype company. In fact, we have a complete set of almost everything they did, including all of their specimen books. Frederick Goudy was an important type designer in the 20th century and designed many typefaces. And here in this display case, we have the original drawings for his last typeface. This is an exhibit of Chinese printing. In these tabletops, we've got them vertically, but they're actually tables, are glyphs for the Chinese language. There are no letters in their language. They are all symbols. And what we have here, you would spin the table around in order to find the glyph that you wanted, and then you would take it out and put it into a tray for printing. And this is actually the small set of their language. It is actually 2 to 3 times as many glyphs as we have in these two tables. This is a wall of small presses. They're called tabletop presses, and they were used to do business cards in small forms. There are also a very nice collection of children's presses. That's how children became interested in the printing industry. They would buy these through Popular Mechanics or other publications. They were very inexpensive, but it taught them how to print. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this whirlwind tour of the Museum of Printing in Haverhill, Massachusetts. We are so happy to be involved in International Print Day. Again, we should appreciate print in all of its forms. It's an important part of our society. We thank everyone who has been involved in creating this wonderful day, and for all of you who have participated. Again, here at the Museum of Printing, we are trying to preserve the past for the future, and we will continue to save not only the technology, but the ephemera and all of the publications involved in print. This is Frank Romano, and we appreciate everything you all do to recognize print as an important part of our society.
I mean, International Print Day would not be complete without Frank Romano in some manner. And just the fact that he created this unique tour for all of us. Jim Hamilton is here with me. He is the vice president of the board of directors of the Museum of Printing. He's also the president of the publisher at Green Harbor Publications, where he writes about an interesting topic, people who fall from ridiculously high heights and survive, which is very cool. But I want to mention 2 things. First of all, interesting fact, I actually carried the Lisa into the Museum of Printing. We picked it up. I was at a conference in Boston, and I was fortunate enough that Julie Schaefer from AP Tech was going to see the museum, asked me to come along for a ride, and went to the post office to pick up some packages. I carried this box in, and Frank's like, oh, it's the Lisa from Steve Jobs. So that was interesting. And the second thing is, Frank is right. You have to stop in the museum shop. I have this little piece of lead type from I guess it's called lead type, right, Jim? From the Museum of Printing that I keep right by my desk to always remind me where we've come from, to really appreciate where we are now and where we are going in the future. Jim, can you tell everybody a bit about your role at the Museum of Printing, please?
Sure. Well, I really work on social media mostly. I live probably as far south of Boston as the museum is north of Boston, so it takes me a little while to get there. So hands-on stuff at the museum is a little harder for me to do, but we have great content that runs on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I also am the editor of the newsletter, so that's something. And as I said, I'm on the board. I should mention for your listeners who are in the Boston area, the museum is open today. It's not normally open on Wednesdays. It's normally 10 to 4 every Saturday. But today, if you can get there between now and 4, you can see Frank Romano in person at the Museum of Printing. And I know he's got a tour of students coming in. It's going to be a great day at the museum.
Yeah, I mean, you guys went all in to help us all celebrate International Print Day, and it is so important. Now, I am a member of the museum. I get the newsletter in my mailbox. I appreciate every once in a while. Not every once in a while. I saw something I wrote in it once. I was thrilled to death about it. How can people get involved in supporting the museum? And most important, Jim, why should they get involved?
Well, it's our mission, supporting the rich history of the graphic arts and printing. And I think people who are watching this, people who are involved in the printing industry, I mean, that's in their heart. You talk about ink in the blood, that's the people who are involved love that kind of thing. There are a lot of benefits of being a member besides just supporting the museum. The newsletter certainly mentioned that. It's a quarterly newsletter. We've just won an award from the New England Museum Association, an honorable mention for our newsletter, which we're very proud of. We do look for submissions from people on the history of printing. There's a big reason for the museum too is for research and education possibilities. We have usually around 35 student groups a year come to the museum, and they come from universities and colleges, high school, technical, voc schools, elementary schools, parents who are homeschooling their kids. So it really is a very educational, big educational opportunity. And there are things there that are happening there that you just don't find anywhere else. I mean, I'm wearing my Otmar Mergenthaler 32-cent stamp sticker, and you can see my Mergenthaler print from the museum, but we have a working linotype machine. Not very many places still have that. A Ludlow that we can set headline type on. I mean, it's fascinating. I encourage people to visit, but even if you can't get there, getting the newsletter and supporting the museum is just so important.
It is, and there are different levels of sponsorships. I believe I pay, if I recall correctly, I think it was $50 or $100. It was somewhere in there, and I'm just a regular person member. But there are members, corporate sponsorships. There are certainly the manufacturers support the effort. But the most important thing that I think is all of the students that come through that museum. And I think it's really the best way to, like I said with my little hot type thing here, to really understand, when people think printing is an antiquated industry, they might think of some of that technology that's in there. That is, some of it is still working, by the way.
Well, we have a letterpress lab. People come in and do that. We run workshops, people either printing on letterpress or stone lithography, on fabric sometimes. There's all sorts of activities that are educational in the sense of using that technology still. And that's the amazing thing, particularly about the technology of, let's say, 100 years ago. You can still use it. You can ink it up and you can print. Those presses from the 1820s, they still work.
Yeah. I mean, preserving history is all of our responsibility. And for a very small commitment, you can help preserve the history of the museum. You can help Frank tells me he gets calls all the time. We have this stuff. If you can just come get it, you can have it. And sometimes he doesn't have a way to go get it. It's kind of like a piano. I've got a piano in my house. Just get it out of here and you can have it. But I would implore everybody to go to the Museum of Printing. What is the website?
It's museumofprinting.org. It's the full app, museumofprinting.org. And so you'll see that. I'd also recommend coming to our YouTube page because we have these Linotype legacy videos. One of the fundraising things that we did was let's keep our Linotype running. Let's make sure it's serviced. Let's make sure we teach the next generation of people how to service. We've got more than, I think, 20 videos right now on that topic. You know, in the video where you saw the guy in the overall sitting at the Linotype machine, that's
Yeah.
Dave's seat, and he is a hot metal expert, and we're sharing his knowledge with that. So, you know, again, if people want to look to help, the Linotype legacy work is really important. We're an entirely volunteer-run organization. We're trying to create an endowment at this point. We would love to have support of individuals, companies, the vendors who support the industry. You know, that really would be great. And if you go to museumofprinting.org, you can find that kind of information. Follow us on social media, watch our YouTube videos. We'd love that.
Thank you so much, Jim. And please extend once again my thank you to Frank. And was it his nephew who helped with the filming, or
I think that was Robert or
oh,
Richard, one of his sons.
oh, Robert. It was Robert. My apologies. I don't think I've ever met Robert. I certainly know Richard. Thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate your time. Everybody, museumofprinting.org. Frank does actually go on LinkedIn sometimes. So if you happen to tag him, just thank him for this for the tour. But Jim, if you go back and as an attendee for any reason, there are just some amazing comments and that everybody is making about the generous information that he shared with everybody, and really for helping preserve the history of the printing industry. So thank you all so much. Talk about a juxtaposition. We have gone from printing history, and now we're going to make some by tuning into Mini Giants, who's having a live event at their facility. We're going to take one quick break, throw a commercial in, and then we're going to start the tour.